Why does crypto matter? If you just click this video, that's what you're here to learn and I'm here to teach. Welcome to DGens for a brighter future. My name is Jorge, and on this channel we produce crypto educational content, crypto news, and crypto interviews. And if you like that kind of stuff, like and subscribe below and share this video with your friends and family. On today's video, we're going to be focusing on some of the most important innovations in the crypto space beyond just number go up and price appreciation. It's this stuff that really makes all of this technology matter. So if you're already familiar with it, join us as we go over this stuff again with you. And if you are new to the space, sit back, relax, and get ready to learn.
Welcome to DGens for a brighter future. Come join the Decentralization.
So before we dive into why crypto matters, we first have to understand Bitcoin and what it is. So what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer cash system invented by the anonymous founder or group Satoshi Nakamoto. The first and major innovation of Bitcoin is that it is trustless and permissionless. And this is the first reason why crypto matters. So by trustless and permissionless, what that means is trustless being that there is no element of trust. In order for you to do a transaction in Bitcoin, it is only between you and the other peer where there's any level of trust. The second thing is that it's permissionless. This means that you and the person you're doing a transaction with do not require an intermediary or third party to conduct this transaction. Now, you might be a little confused as to what this all means. So let's try looking at a payment with a debit card or credit card. First things first, if you wanted to use a debit card or credit card, you would need permission from a bank or financial institution to have that card to go ahead and do that transaction. So first you would need permission. The second thing is once you have the permission for the card, you would go to the store, buy whatever it is you want, and when you swipe the card, then the vendor and you have to rely on the bank or card provider in the middle to hope that this transaction goes through. If for some reason something happened with that bank or that card provider, maybe it won't work. You also have to rely on them to make sure the transaction goes through, possibly cancel it. They may also reverse it. So this is actually a profoundly inefficient way to do transactions. Now, if you were to look at cash, you just go to the store, give the vendor your cash, get the product or service you need, and then you walk out. And there's no third party needed. So Bitcoin is striving to be more like cash, or really it already is. So this is actually extremely important. And keep in mind that since it's permissionless, then anybody can use it, no matter how old, no matter your race, the language you speak, your religion, your sexual identity. Bitcoin does not discriminate against anyone. So you can actually access it right now with ease and no trouble at all. Since there's no third party in Bitcoin, you also have to understand that the transactions that are done digitally are final and they're recorded on the network. So actually, if you wanted your Bitcoin back, you would have to communicate with whomever you are sending this Bitcoin to have it sent back to you. But otherwise, there's no way to undo transactions as they are all final. So the second important innovation is self-custody. Now, you might not be familiar with that term, but every time you go to a bank and you deposit money, you're trusting that bank to be an honorable custodian of your wealth. Now, this is an important factor because the way the bank makes money is that they're essentially lending out your money, getting interest from the people they lend it out to. So that's how they make money. Now, some people might not feel very comfortable with that, or knowing that their money is being used in a way that they might not necessarily want it to be used as. So self-custody essentially means that you can, in this example, take your Bitcoin and put it on a hardware wallet or digital wallet where nobody can have access to it except for you if you have your cryptographic keys. There's a saying that goes, not your keys, not your coins. So if you actually purchase crypto on an exchange and it's sitting there, that means that the exchange is the custodian of your wealth. And therefore, if something crazy were to happen to the custodian, you may not have access to your cryptocurrency. So in this case, if you're watching, nothing here is financial advice, but I do need to say that self-custodying your crypto is extremely important. It's one of the most important innovations in financial history. Until that point, you either had cash in a safe, but now, or cash in a safe or cash in a bank account, but now you can hold it digitally. The third reason cryptocurrency matters is consensus. Now, consensus is the mechanism by which cryptocurrencies can agree and verify all the transactions on the blockchain and avoid double spending. Now, double spending was an issue at different attempts at eCash in the early 90s. As the name implies, essentially a transaction was duplicated multiple times by a central body, and by doing that, the value of the eCash was destroyed and trust in that network was destroyed as well. So in order to avoid these issues, Satoshi Nakamoto had to remove the central body which could corrupt the network. And in order to do that, he utilized a consensus algorithm created in the 90s called proof of work. Now, proof of work is simply an algorithm or a system that uses computing effort to prove and invalidate any fake uses of the network. Now, this is extremely important because in order to avoid a double spend, then you have to avoid the creation of fake transactions. Now, how does proof of work solve the double spend problem? How are transactions not being duplicated? Well, the way it's done is that in Bitcoin, proof of work is used in order to measure computing power in order to receive rewards. What I mean by that is that every single time a block is being produced, a block can carry about 100 transactions. Now, miners will compete against one another to guess a secret password associated with the block. When that password is solved by one of those miners, the block is then opened, and those transactions are added to a ledger that is distributed among the users of Bitcoin and tracked by nodes, which are also miners. By that logic, that means that the block, which has the transactions, is added to the ledger, which has every other transaction from every block, i.e. a chain. Now, why would miners want to do this? This is because mining in Bitcoin in particular, by this consensus mechanism, allows them to receive an incentive of new Bitcoins as well as the fees that are aggregated in the network. Not to mention that because of this consensus mechanism, the transactions are constantly being verified by every miner and the one that is mining that particular block, which increases the security of the network and ensures that there is no duplication of transactions, especially as more miners come onto the network and thus make the ledger more and more and more distributed. So suffice to say, it's an unbelievable innovation. Consensus in cryptocurrency can be done in a multitude of ways, though I did want to highlight that Bitcoin was the first system to create a consensus. This also means that every transaction is verified, and therefore they eliminated the double spend problem in digital cash. Fourth reason cryptocurrency matters is because through consensus we found decentralization. With Bitcoin having so many different miners and nodes and participants, there was no single point of failure. You would need to have hundreds of billions of dollars just to have enough computing power to hijack the network. Therefore, it is decentralized by having all the participants. And not only that, but because of the consensus, we get a transparent ledger which you can always look and see all of the transactions in the network, unlike a bank, which only those who work at the bank or are in charge of the bank get to see the transactions going on between the various banks and central banks. So one last bonus thing about Bitcoin is that it has a cap supply of 21 million. This was made in the design so that way its value would only increase over time as people utilize the network for payments and transactions. And this is extremely important because I made the comparison between Bitcoin and cash. If you use cash, it's a peer-to-peer transaction without a third party that basically cannot be traced. Whereas with Bitcoin, although it's a peer-to-peer transaction, it is transparent and there's a ledger that anybody can use. But one of the main advantages to holding onto Bitcoin as opposed to cash is that the value of cash decreases over time as inflation increases because the supply of money is always increasing. Now, what do I mean by this? 5 years ago, if you were to go to a store and you wanted to buy a bottle of water, it might have cost you $1. Now, follow me here. Let's say 5 years later, your salary never changed, and that bottle of water cost $2. That means with the amount of money that you've held, assuming that it's been the same all this time, you can't really buy as many water bottles. right? So therefore, the money that you were holding lost value over time, which means you lost purchasing power. Whereas with Bitcoin, if you would have held it 5 years ago, the actual price would have been about $4,000 or so, somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000. So, say 5 years pass, that $1 bottle of water that you went to the store to buy doubles in price. Well, even though we're in a bear market currently, Bitcoin has risen as high as 69, and at its current price is around $20,000. So what that means is that despite the increase in the price of that bottle of water, you can buy more bottles of water with that Bitcoin, assuming that you held or earned the same amount of Bitcoin over time. This is because the model built around this concept of digital scarcity. So nothing here is financial advice, but I wanted to make note of the cap supply and why people keep calling Bitcoin a hedge against inflation. It's not necessarily a reason why crypto matters so much as it is a reason that Bitcoin matters. Now, with that being said, we're going to get into the innovations that were created and spurred by altcoins such as Ethereum. So in order to talk about why altcoins matter, we're going to be focusing particularly on Ethereum. This is because a lot of Ethereum's innovations kind of spurred on a lot of the innovations within the altcoin space. So what is Ethereum and who founded it? So the founders of Ethereum actually go way back to 2013. The leader was a gentleman by the name of Vitalik Buterin, who still is kicking and screaming in the industry, by the way. And he was an incredible engineer who wanted to add a layer of programmability to the Bitcoin network. However, he realized he would have to create an entirely different blockchain in order to do this, and he teamed up with incredible engineers like Gavin Wood, who would start Polkadot, and Charles Hoskins, who would later start Cardano. Suffice to say, all these incredible minds coming together and created one of the most major technological innovations of our time, known as the Ethereum network, which would launch on July 30th, 2015. And it has since grown to the second largest cryptocurrency network by market cap. So what are the main differences between Bitcoin and Ethereum to understand? Well, as I mentioned earlier, Bitcoin is a trustless and permissionless peer-to-peer network that also kind of acts as like a hedge against inflation that is transparent. So Ethereum takes a lot of these qualities. However, Ethereum doesn't have a cap supply and instead has an inflation rate every single year. So more coins will come into existence over time. Now, if it's not a hedge against inflation, then how does it aggregate value? Well, the concept of Ethereum is that the programs that come onto the network will increase demand to use the network, and therefore the price of the token will increase. And in order to use those applications, you have to pay gas fees in the Ether coin, which is the native coin of the Ethereum network. Now, how do these decentralized applications run, and how would they build demand for the network? This is through the fifth reason why crypto matters, which is smart contracts. And for those of you that don't know what a smart contract is, smart contracts are essentially a line of code that needs a certain set of prerequisites to occur, as well as the payment of a gas fee in order to activate. Now, if that sounds jargony to you, all it really means is that if something happens, then something else will happen, because that's what essentially contracts are. But in real life, when you enter a contract, typically it's on paper, and there's a lot of trust needed between individuals in order to make sure that this contract happens. So by doing a smart contract, you essentially eliminate the need of trust, and you create a decentralized mechanism that allows parties to engage in commerce or do transactions without having to worry about that layer of trust. Now, there's a lot of scenarios where this could work. For example, someone using an application similar to Uber might need a ride somewhere. Now, Uber typically takes a cut of that transaction in order to keep their company running and for facilitating that transaction. And this creates certain issues, like the driver might lose a little bit of their profit because they have to share some of it with Uber in particular. And Uber also has a lot of overhead costs like servers, staff, real estate, and so on. So imagine if you could just run everything on a smart contract. The driver could put out an offer, like say, if you pay $60 in Ethereum, I will give you a ride. And so someone sees that opportunity, goes to the smart contract, and gives out the $60 as well as a small gas fee in order to activate that transaction and gets their ride. The driver gets more money from the service that they are providing, and the user likely is paying somewhat less in order to do that transaction. Another great example could be a company like eBay. Instead of eBay facilitating this transaction using server space, hiring employees and staff and all this other stuff and all that bank jargon that I mentioned earlier, instead, two individuals could just the seller could simply put up their phone for sale and say $1,000 in Ether, and then someone can see that transaction and it could be facilitated instantly through the smart contract, and nobody would have to worry about a trusted party. Now, granted, for the case of eBay, you might need self-driving cars and robots that are doing a lot of the stuff in between, but you get where I'm going with this. There's even been speculation about the concept of doing real estate over on Ethereum through smart contracts. And imagine all the friction that would be removed between dealing with a realtor, having to go through a bank, doing all these mortgages and all this other stuff, listing it out to sell. Chances are all the costs associated could be reduced by removing all these other third parties and just doing it over on the Ethereum network or other layer 1 smart contract blockchain. And it's important to understand what a smart contract is, because it's the foundation for a lot of all the other reasons that we'll be discussing about why crypto matters. So for the sixth reason why crypto matters, we'll be diving into DeFi, or decentralized finance. And before we get to what that is, we have to understand what exactly finance consists of. So in traditional finance, one of the main issues is that there's too many central parties that control a lot of how the financial networks work. Now, what I mean by that is that you have to rely on a lot of trust for these systems to function properly. You have to trust that the bank is not lending out too much of your money and continues to be solvent in order for you to withdraw your cash. You have to also hope that you're eligible for certain financial tools, such as loans, and they can actually make the rates based on whatever your financial past is. And also the rules can frequently change, and how these things work can be subject to a lot of these different types of issues that come with the human variable. There's also tools like insurance, where your insurance rate can just randomly change all the time. And so with all of this in mind, decentralized finance serves as a method to eliminate these parties from these financial tools. So what is decentralized finance used for? So DeFi is predominantly used for trading, lending and borrowing, and aggregating yield. This is all a phenomenal innovation within the financial space as a whole, not just decentralized finance. It also brought upon many different tokens, but most importantly, stablecoins. And so for the next portion of this video, we'll be focusing on lending and borrowing, stablecoins, and decentralized trading, and how all these things work. So first off, we're going to talk about lending and borrowing because it's one of the backbones of all of DeFi. So how does lending and borrowing work in the real world versus DeFi? Well, in the real world, typically the way it works is that a small portion of whatever you're going to borrow is put down. The bank then chooses whatever your rate is of interest, and then you can borrow that money. So say you need $1,000, you might put down $100. The bank might give you a rate of 10%. Now, obviously in this model, there has to be a lot of trust. The bank has to worry that you're gonna pay off this loan or it's gonna be in the hole $900. Also, you as a borrower have to hope that you're getting the best terms possible with the bank. So DeFi solves the issues of trust in lending and borrowing by making it peer-to-peer and creating code that keeps these smart contracts liquid at all times. Now, how does this work? Say you're a person that wants to get some yield conservatively on a crypto asset. For the sake of this example, we're going to use Ether, and you go onto a lending and borrowing platform like, say, Aave, Compound, maybe a MakerDAO, and you see a solid rate of maybe 3 to 5%. So you see that if you lend out your Ethereum, you get 3 to 5% on one of these protocols. Now, how does this work for the borrower? Since there's so many people lending out their crypto, there's a lot of liquidity inside of the smart contract that allows for people to borrow. Now, how does it work since we have stated a scenario like a regular bank needing to use a lot of trust? Well, the way it works is that you can only borrow against your assets through over-collateralization. Now, the way that works is, say you have one Bitcoin. As I'm shooting, Bitcoin's a little over $20,000. So you have your Bitcoin, you think it's gonna be $1 million one day, but you need access to cash and you don't wanna sell your Bitcoin. So what you do is you lend your entire Bitcoin so you can receive a certain amount of money versus your Bitcoin. Typically, the way these contracts work is that they'll give you maybe 50 to 60% of that Bitcoin's value. So you end up getting $10,000, which now you can use to go spend in real life, whether it's to pay off some type of debt, or you need to buy groceries, go on vacation, whatever the case may be, or you can take that money and go out and do your DeFi shenanigans, try to get more money out of it, go back, pay off your $10,000 loan, and get back your Bitcoin. Now, that is kind of an ideal scenario, paying off your loan and then getting back your collateral. Now, you might be thinking, is there a scenario where you can't get your collateral back? And I'm glad you asked, because there is. So suppose you borrowed $10,000. Now, the smart contract is keeping track of the price of your Bitcoin, and the liquidation risk might be something like 25%. So if Bitcoin falls by 25% and you've borrowed $10,000 and you're unable to pay off that loan, or maybe your DeFi shenanigans didn't work out, then what it will do is, as the price falls by 25%, it will automatically sell that Bitcoin around that $15,000 mark. And that means that the protocol itself lent out $10,000 and earned $5,000. So because of that, there's always constant liquid value inside of the smart contract. There's also a little bit of an interest rate associated for the borrower to pay over time. So they can be up on the borrower's position by 25%, and they can also receive a little bit of interest. It's a really brilliant model that removes the need for trust and a third party, hence DeFi. So for the next portion of the DeFi section, I wanted to talk about stablecoins, because they are extremely important, not just for DeFi, but for decentralized applications as a whole. They basically make things a lot smoother and easier to work. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to talk about the traditional centralized stablecoins, such as USDC, Tether, and BUSD, Paxos, and so on. So how do they function? So first off, a lot of these stablecoins are quite centralized, and they have backing collateral such as cash, corporate paper, and government debt. And so these assets are quite liquid. So every stablecoin is already backed, in theory. Then when you purchase a stablecoin, you're essentially creating a new stablecoin. Because when you buy the stablecoin, you're redeeming your dollar for that stablecoin, which is valid and redeemable for $1. When you sell your stablecoin and you get a dollar back, in theory, the protocol that the smart contract that the United States dollar stablecoin, BUSD, Paxos, or whatever, will burn a stablecoin in the process. And they do this to make sure that the supply isn't too big or too small, and that there's always enough cash to redeem every single stablecoin. Now, with that being said, why do they matter? So if we didn't have stablecoins, say you had your Ethereum and it went from 500 to 2,000. Great, you made 1,500, but you want to realize those gains. So you have to move your Ethereum from the network to your centralized exchange. You would then sell your Ethereum on the centralized exchange for a fee into cash. Then you would have to deposit that cash into your bank account, which could take a few days. Then you see another opportunity. You see Ethereum going down to $1,000 and you realize it's undervalued. So you get your cash, and try to move it into the exchange. Once it's in there after a few days, you then buy Ethereum. You want to earn yield on it, so then you move it onto the network, and all of this creates a lot of complications. Now, in the scenario with the stablecoin, you can just take that Ethereum that was 500 and turned into 2,000 and just sell it on a decentralized exchange, which will be the next portion after. And by doing that, you now have these stable coins that represent your full $2,000 value, and you can make the choice whether to move it onto the exchange or just hold it in your wallet and wait for another opportunity to buy back into Ethereum. So it creates a lot less friction and makes the experience for the user a lot more simple. Now, suffice to say, there's a lot of different stablecoins, and I do have a plan to make a video exploring all the different kinds. So stay tuned for that. And with that being said, now we're gonna go to the next part. So the next thing is trading. Now, obviously there's the centralized exchanges like Coinbase, Gemini, Kraken, among many others, where you can readily just buy direct in cash and get your cryptocurrency. And normally this involves, fees and a couple other things that might make the experience a little annoying or more difficult. However, which, by the way, centralized exchanges are awesome still, not throwing them under the bus, but I'm just saying the alternative is decentralized exchanges. Now, what's great about decentralized exchanges is that the rules behind the exchange are hard-coded and immutable, like any other smart contract. These DEXs, or decentralized exchanges, allow you to swap between crypto assets and tokens on the blockchain with ease, and typically at really low rates, like less than 1% or less than 0.5%. The most popular, Uniswap, for example, would allow you to swap between Ethereum and the stable coins that I described earlier. So if you bought Ethereum for 500, took it on the decentralized exchange, and it went up to $2,000, you would need to use that exchange to realize those gains in stable coins. Now, this is a really useful tool, but you might be asking yourself, when it's decentralized and there's no middleman, then how do you have the coins needed to do these exchanges? Well, it's actually a really brilliant system called liquidity pools. So the way it works is that investors can take two different cryptocurrencies, in this case, Ethereum and let's say USDC, and put them inside of a pool where the value of both tokens is the same and kept at a constant. Otherwise, there's impermanent loss. And for the sake of brevity and simplicity, I will just link a video that explains impermanent loss below. Now, if there's impermanent loss as a risk, why would the investor want to pool these two assets together? And the reason is because there's a yield that they can earn by doing so, which makes it quite lucrative. So in this case, with Ethereum and USDC coin, the investors pooled the assets together, and that provides liquidity for the exchange, so that way you can switch your Ethereum to United States dollar coin. And the way that investor is going to receive that yield is through the fees of the swapping of the different cryptocurrency tokens and assets on the network. So how does the liquidity pool know how to distribute rewards when there's so many different investors in the pool? Well, it's actually a really simple process. Basically, once the investor has given the two crypto assets into the pool, that investor will receive what are called LP tokens, or liquidity pool tokens. These tokens act as a receipt for the two assets that have been put in the pool. These tokens can actually be redeemed for those assets as well as the yield that was aggregated on those assets. The other thing that makes liquidity pool tokens really phenomenal is that they allow the protocol to keep track of the share of that pool. Now, what does that mean? Obviously, some people are going to put maybe $10 worth of cryptocurrency in the pool, and some people will put hundreds, and some people will put thousands and hundreds of thousands. So in order to distribute these rewards amongst the people who are in the pool properly, this is dependent on how many liquidity pool tokens they're holding inside of their wallet. This way, when they redeem, they can get the same assets as well as the yield that they generated per their share of the pool. So the process of going through different decentralized exchanges in order to find very promising liquidity pools is referred to as yield farming. So it's a really brilliant model with a lot of simplicity that allows for people to access different cryptocurrencies really well. And actually on this channel, I did a really great interview with Chad Barraford, the core developer of Thor Chain, which allows you to swap between layer 1 crypto assets. Now, you might not understand that, but you might want to learn about it. So check the video right here, okay? So you can learn more about that. Anyways, that decentralized exchanges are an extremely important innovation within the crypto space. However, before you make the decision as to whether you want to start yield farming or not, it's it's extremely important that you understand impermanent loss. So just in case, I'm going to leave a link below because that's going to be a little bit complicated if this is your first time learning about it. And hopefully this will help you make a better financial decision, because I'm not a financial advisor and we always want you to do your own research. So as far as DeFi is concerned, we've learned at this particular section of the video that decentralized finance lets you leverage a public ledger, which makes these things transparent, while also leveraging the decentralized security that comes with blockchain. You also have opportunities to borrow and earn yield by using decentralized protocols and even stablecoins, so that way you can easily move from one cryptocurrency to another without having too much loss in between. Now it's time for the 7th reason why crypto matters. So, what is the 7th reason? NFTs. Now, I know you're watching this and you're probably like, I've heard this 1,000 times, but I don't see the value, I don't know what an NFT is. So I'm just going to keep it very simple for the sake of this video. But an NFT is a non-fungible token. Now, what fungible means, whether it's physical or digital, it simply means that that item can be substituted with something of equal value. And normally, as an attribute, these things are typically indistinguishable from one another, though not always true. For example, if I gave you a $5 bill and you gave me 5 $1 bills back, despite them looking different, they are valued exactly the same, and so neither of us are upset with that exchange. The same thing goes for cryptocurrency. When you sell Bitcoin at a certain price, you get the amount of money that you sold it at. And typically, fungible items are also almost immediately liquid, like casino chips and gold. So, with that being said, that means NFTs must be distinguishable from one another, and they are not easily liquid. Which means that if you were to sell these items, they must be an agreement between parties for that sale to happen. Now, items like this typically include works of art, sculptures, collectibles, and in this case, digital collectibles. But what exactly is an NFT in terms of technicals? So an NFT is actually a token that is distinguishable from all the other tokens created on that smart contract. It's also important to note that what really gives the NFT actual value is the code associated with the NFT in question. It's a digital certificate of ownership, and it's the actual part of the NFT that's valuable. If you had a Bored Ape or a CryptoPunk, and I took a picture of it and made it my Twitter account photo, that does not mean that I own it, which means I do not have the value behind that NFT. And while some people think that that still sounds kind of crazy, think about how many people can just look at a photo of the Mona Lisa. Nobody would care if you, they might, but most people wouldn't care if you showed them a photo of the Mona Lisa. It's seeing it in person that makes its value. It's the fact that there's only one Mona Lisa in the world. And with Bored Apes, it's an incredibly limited supply of these digital art JPEGs, and they have aggregated value for it. Though those NFTs also come with merch, exclusive parties, I believe a Discord chat where you can speak to all the famous people that own them, like Paris Hilton, certain basketball players, and Justin Bieber, I believe. So there's a lot of value that's beyond just the JPEG. The other thing that's notable too is that now there's NFT land as well. So now there's sort of digital real estate being traded left and right. And most of these are built on the idea of the metaverse. Though, being honest, we haven't really seen the metaverse realized yet. And that's probably content for another video, so I'm not gonna go too deep into that. The next thing is that NFTs are being used in games, which is where I see a lot of the value in the near term. This is because if you were to play a game right now, like say Call of Duty, then you can buy like a skin for your gun. And the thing is, once you're done with the game, or if you're bored with it, it doesn't matter. There's no interest with that. And all you did was give money away for a digital item that you never really owned. But with NFT inclusion, you would be able to sell that NFT to another individual when you're bored of that game. There's also NFTs that are being used for private memberships, whether it's a food club or going to private meetups with celebrities around the world. So NFTs are still building up their true value, though I don't believe they've been realized yet. One last thing I wanted to mention is my favorite story about an NFT was actually about a home that was sold in Gulfport, Florida for about $654,000, or in ETH at the time, 202 ETH. So with that being said, that person was able to put the deed to their home as an NFT. Now there was a realtor in the middle, however, it's a step in the right direction to creating smart contracts that make our lives just a little bit easier, and that is extremely exciting. So suffice to say that the future looks really bright for NFTs. Now, before you get really excited, I do want to preface by saying that NFTs are extremely interesting, though at this point in time, they are extremely speculative. They're also not fungible. So just because you own a really fancy or rare NFT does not mean you can sell it super fast and get cash tomorrow. You have to hope that there's enough volume, interest in the NFT space, and you also have to hope that other people see value in your NFT and have a willingness to buy it. It's more like selling a painting or a used car. So just keep that in mind. And with that being said, it's time for the next and final innovation of why crypto matters. So now it's time for the 8th reason and final reason that cryptocurrency matters. And that is DAOs. Now, what is a DAO? Well, it stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. If I were to break this down in a really simple way, it's simply a smart contract that is being governed by individuals who hold the token and can vote for changes to the smart contract. Now, you might be thinking of that and you might see sort of a parallel with a business. Now, the structure is completely different because of the A for autonomous. So the concept here is that the code itself is the one that is doing all of the business and aggregating the value for the DAO. For the individuals that hold the token of the DAO, they can make votes and make proposals for the DAO itself, and that can create changes to the smart contract. They can even vote for new employees who will be coding on the DAO, and they could even vote on the salary for the people that are hired onto the DAO as staff. Now keep in mind, this means that all the participants have equal say, provided that they have enough tokens, since one vote is one token. This creates a lot of value for the DAO tokens, as they will increase in value with the success of the DAO itself and the smart contract aggregating more and more value. Now, that being said, not everything is bright and shiny, as they do have a couple downfalls. If we look at a regular company, there's certain things that they might have an advantage of over a DAO. A company has a small board, a CEO, and typically the board will make a decision and then the CEO will do everything in their power to make sure that this is acted upon. Now, there's some upsides and downsides to the DAO. The first thing is that DAOs are trustless. There is no one that you really need to trust. Every single member has a say in something, and this helps with the decentralization of the DAO and also the community governance of the DAO itself. Another benefit of this is that DAOs cannot be shut down. Not even the government can go and shut down the DAO, because the DAO itself is just code. If anybody wanted to make extreme change, government or otherwise, they would have to purchase enough coins to do that. The other thing too is that the DAO is open source. Now, this is a good thing and a bad thing, because it's a good thing because if you wanted to become a part of the DAO, you could look at the code and see what's behind it. You can see if this is a scam or not. However, this causes problems because that means that competition, say a business, could take a look at the code, see what is going on, and potentially copy that code as well. So transparency comes with its own failures as well. But if we can just create a scenario where a DAO is creating value, let's look at a company like eBay. eBay has so many people and has to pay for all the server space, as I mentioned earlier, in this very complex structure, and then they take a bigger portion of the profits than perhaps is necessary. But what if a DAO could automate every single process? Well, we could picture the DAO managing the cost associated with the transaction. The DAO could also automate the cost of, say, autonomous vehicles, robots that are taking these items and delivering them wherever they go, or drones, and would take on those costs, minimize them as much as possible through code, and then eventually, when these transactions are going through, people who hold the token could potentially see a dividend of some sort being distributed among them. Now, this seems like a highly futuristic concept for its time, but it's within the realm of possibility. And within cryptocurrency, there are several DAOs that are functioning and succeeding really well. So one thing I did want to mention before telling you guys what my favorite DAO is that there are some concerns, not just about transparency, but about the governance model itself. While having no leader and having a free democratic system where people vote on ideas as opposed to individuals who will make those decisions for them, what is kind of a fault of the system itself is the fact that one token equals one vote. Now, not every DAO is the same, and so this model might apply differently, or there might be structures in place to avoid this issue. However, theoretically, it is possible for someone wealthy enough to come in and buy a large portion of the tokens and either have way more sway within the DAO itself or potentially take over the DAO. So that is something to keep in mind, and I do recommend that if you look into DAOs, read the discords, talk to people who participate in the DAO, do your own research, always. And now for my favorite DAO. In particular, my favorite is MakerDAO, which is responsible for creating a decentralized stablecoin called DAI. It's a lending and borrowing protocol that always has enough liquidity to back all of the DAI that is in circulation. Now, just to sum it up really quickly, MakerDAO is, well, a DAO. It's actually the largest decentralized smart contract protocol in the entire crypto space, with over $8 billion in total value locked as of recording this video. But essentially all that it does, it's a lending and borrowing protocol that takes the collateral and issues DAI, which is a stablecoin that is pegged to the US dollar, for the collateral that they receive. And they issue a maximum of 66% of the value of your collateral. So essentially every single DAI stablecoin is always over collateralized. It's one of the darlings of the crypto space, and DAI in particular has had an incredible success rate. Even through this bear market, it's maintained its peg. Now, that's a very broad oversimplification. DAI and MakerDAO are incredibly complex, and they deserve a video in itself. In a link down below, I've put some information for you to watch so you can get a quick summary of what MakerDAO is and what it does. But it's an incredible success story of how the DAO model can truly build value for its users. Just wanted to say that DAOs are an interesting innovation, still a little bit speculative, but it's really interesting to see how these organizations evolve. So what do we do with all of this information? Where do we go from here? Well, we now understand that the foundations of crypto are built around Bitcoin, which is being decentralized, self-custodied, trustless and permissionless, and built on consensus among all the individuals who participate within a given network. Then we look at the innovations of altcoins, which are all built around smart contracts, DeFi, NFTs, and DAOs, all creating very unique and unbelievable experiences in this new realm of blockchain technology. But what does it all really mean? And what I think it means is that there's so much potential in the world of having less and less third parties. Suffice to say that as we become more advanced, we're going to be able to find unique and creative ways to make our lives easier, smoother, and with less friction. But that doesn't mean that we're all going to be taken over by AI and robots or blockchain. It simply means that they're going to become more integrated in our everyday lives. And I think that blockchain, not financial advice, presents a lot of opportunities. And I think we're profoundly early to this new frontier and threshold. I wanted to say that this video took so much research, editing my heart out, and I'd really appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share if you can. I also wanted to give a big shout out to some of the YouTube videos that I watched and the different places where I read so much information, the Bitcoin white paper, tons of videos from Humphrey Yang and Whiteboard Crypto, and a big shout out to Coin Bureau, who's a massive inspiration for what I do. Hopefully I'll be at a convention or something and I'll meet you guys. I love your content. But anyways, thank you all for watching. Thank you. This is such a meaningful thing that I love to do. And when you're out there, don't forget, degen safely.
Come